All Things TechIE podcast is a product of the Extreme Media Network. For advertising and sponsorship opportunities, please visit www.extrememedia.ie. That's XTREME media.ie.
It's Justin Dawson. It's the All Things TechIE podcast. Now, it's International Podcast Day, so thank you for all the people that have just been tuning into this podcast in the past couple of hours. And also, it is the hashtag We Make Events, which is so important, lighting up the whole global world red to highlight the AV industry and the events industry is in crisis. But last episode, we had Tom Kerr on our program, formerly from Avix, and now we were aware that Tom was looking at a job, and it's been announced. So congratulations to Tom. We're going to give him a round of applause there. But we're going to continue on our series here, and I've got another, I hate to say former employee of Avixa, but he's going to tell a story. He's under the spotlight. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us on the All Things TechIE podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start off. The way I ask all our Under the Spotlight guests is, where did it all begin? Like, as Tom says, you don't just wake up one day and go, I want to be an audiovisual technician.
Yeah, it really wasn't on like a list of jobs that they advertised back in school. I actually kind of got started when I was in the military. Back in 1996, I was in Bosnia, and I was actually running a video conference unit out of a tent, working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months. And that was my first
Skype, was it? It wasn't Skype.
No, we had actually an AMX system.
Okay.
We had a big monitor, we had a document camera, and I think we did all of 4 calls a week.
Wow.
And I worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 7 days a week.
Did you just say it was in 1990s?
Yes.
Yeah. What type of video conferencing units was going on back in 1990?
It was RGB-HV. Yeah, it was RGB-HV. The AMX panel was green and black, and that was it. And yeah, it was 1996.
Wow. Just to all our young listeners, we did have the internet back in the 1990s, but it was slow.
The young listeners should know that because Windows 95, and everyone talks about, oh yeah, yes, it was dial-up internet still and DSL, but we didn't have to worry about that because we really didn't have too much internet. We were using ISDN, so it was more phone lines at the time than internet. But yeah, I got my start there, kind of getting the hands-on and kind of the little spark started. So when I got out of the military right around 2000, I was kind of just picking up jobs just to pass the time. And it happened to be, I was working at a restaurant as a cook, and the bartender's husband was an integration manager for an AV company, and he was ex-military.
Oh, super.
So yeah, we got talking, and next thing I know, he's like, "Give me your resume." A week later, I had a job.
Wow. So you did mention off mic, most of your background and even your qualifications was networking.
Well, kind of, sort of. I have a degree in computer networking,
Okay.
but I didn't finish that until 2012.
Wow.
But I've always kind of been into computers. When I was in the military, I was in communications, and I was learning Unix and all the other systems that were around back then. For all those old heads, DOS.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a background in it, but I was never really proficient at it until I went and got my degree. But I also started at the very bottom of the industry, where I was starting at rack build. Then I was pulling cable and learning terminations, and worked my way up to lead technician. And eventually that actually evolved to where I was with my first company for 11 years, and I was a service technician. And that's when I started getting into a little bit of programming and coding, because I had to be the one guy that did it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done everything from residential around the world, government installations here in the United States, as well as commercial integration. And eventually, again, transpired and rolled into doing design work.
So, where's been your favorite place to work?
Ooh. Honestly, the first company I was at. It was a small little mom and pop company. We had 35 employees total, and that included the original owner's wife,
Brilliant.
their son, who was the new owner after the original owner passed, and his sister, and even his kids. So the other 30 of us were just regular employees, and it was those five. But it was just a great company. I mean, we knew everybody. When somebody was getting married, most of us were there. If somebody was going through something, it just became a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the best experiences I had. Granted, the company's pretty much gone now. I think they're just doing design consulting.
Okay.
But we did everything from design, bidding, building, everything in house.
So we're talking about back in the days before Avixa, so Infocom. When did you go off and do your first exam and get your CTS?
2001.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was the original, well, I shouldn't say the original, but one of the original types of the exam where you take the class, the 3-day course, and at the end of the 3-day course, they handed you the written test.
Mm-hmm.
If you passed that, you were a CTS. And then I studied up and worked on getting my CTSI, where, again, they basically handed you a written test, you filled out the answers, and then you had to go to stations and perform different activities, whether it was terminating
Tom
cable.
was saying this in the last episode, and I was like, wow, that's so much different to going in and doing a computer-based exam.
Yeah, and the big difference was back then when they were trying to say, yes, you know what you're doing. Not only can you talk about it, but you can demonstrate it. And right after you demonstrate it, they asked you questions about what you did to make sure you had the knowledge. With the computer-based test that they've switched to was because of ANSI, being ANSI accredited, which is, again, is part of ISO and all that, so it's internationally recognized. It was to validate that not only could you communicate it, but did you understand? But they wanted to take away the potential for outside influence.
Yeah.
So that's why it's all computerized. Granted, I do miss the old days because I'd like to know people knew how to terminate fiber.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Like I have to say, hand on heart, that like I wouldn't know how to terminate fiber, and I've done the test once. I understand some of the questions, you know.
Yeah.
But we will talk about that off mic as well on how I fell down a couple of questions, and I think I went wrong on a couple of things. But so out of the three exams, then, Marcus, what was the easier one? Some people say the D, some people say the I.
The CTS was definitely easy, just because, one, I was one of those few people that had my CTS and my CTSI and then got busy with work and they expired. So I had to go back and take them both again.
Uh-oh. No, I'm never going to let that happen. It's like the driving test for me, you know. I'll have to admit, actually, on like, okay, in America, it's different. You have automatic cars. I'm going to go with that. We drive manual cars here, okay? So just
So do I.
put that. I failed my driving test 8 times in Ireland.
You know what? That's Ireland.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is as strict as Ireland, because I've seen the drivers there.
Yeah. No, it's ridiculous. You know, like I have cases where I failed just because I arrived at the test center in the absolute pourings of rain, and one of my headlights was out, and it's like, no, that's a fail. I was like, can we just even go for a drive? You know, make me feel good.
How about if I drive and get it fixed while you're in the car?
Yeah, you know, but and then on one stage, like I was driving along, and another case where I was driving along, and someone pulled up in front of me and decided to chat to someone on the footpath out the passenger window, and pull in front of me, and I just looked at the driving tester and said, am I supposed to overtake, and they're just waiting for me to make a move, and they gave me a grade 3 fault of and an instant fail for overtaking the vehicle. It's like, but the vehicle's on the corner and pulled in and not has a
Well,
Well,
I would say technically, if you didn't do anything illegal, there was no oncoming traffic. It was nothing imposed, but they were impeding traffic.
yeah.
You bypassed them like
So
anybody would do.
I asked the tester after the exam, so how did I get that grade 3? And they're like, oh, bring that up with your driving instructor. And I was like, no, hold on a minute. Hold on, you're the tester. You have to tell me where it went wrong. And he walked away from me. So, anyways, that's
Yeah, my driving test was I got in the car, we pulled out, I made 3 left turns, and the third one was to pull. The fourth turn was to go right back into where I parked out. I just went in the square. There was no parking. There was no nothing. We went around the building. Done. You passed.
Wow.
But again, that was almost 30 years ago.
Well, my late dad didn't even do a driving test. It was just such a waiting list that they just gave him a piece of paper and said, just go on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's definitely not like the audio-visual certifications there are. But
no.
but yeah, as your original question was, yeah, the CTS was by far the easiest. But very close to that to me was the I.
Mm-hmm.
The CTSI was pretty easy because I'd been doing installation. Again, when I first got the certification, I'd been doing it for 2 years. And when I had to redo it was back in 2015. So I had almost 15 years of experience. So I just kind of knocked it out. I actually did it at the US show, and I was teaching the CTS prep course. And to encourage the students, hey, if you could do this and take the test. And I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll take my CTSI exam. And if I pass, y'all have to at least consider taking it.
Wow.
So I took the test and passed it.
Awesome. What year was that in? That wasn't too long ago.
2015 when I got that redone.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. So
yeah, because had to be a CTS to teach at Avixa,
okay.
At least. So I had that going in, and I got the I, so I could teach the install courses. And then 2019, I finally got my CTSD.
And
it only took me 7 tries.
Wow. So that's the exam that you're not going to let the renewal units drop on.
Definitely not. No, that one, and the thing that got me with that one really was I was overthinking things and second guessing myself. I knew almost all the material, but I just kept going, well, is it?
Well, I think, and that's the key thing for all the listeners and all the viewers of this, don't second guess, because I think that's what's thrown me down.
Usually your first instinct is going to be correct.
Yeah.
And if anything, if you question it, just hit that mark for review and move to the next one.
Yeah. Don't waste time on it.
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't do that the last time I took it, and I passed it with flying colors. I'm like,
yeah.
That was easy. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm never gonna do it again.
We won't talk about the times that. Yeah, so I'm going to ask you that before we get into how you ended up working with the Avixa. I'm going to say, in your times of being in all areas, and you say even globally with AV, a moment where something went terribly wrong, and you went, and shit is hitting the fan. How did you correct it? And give us a great story there.
Well, there's a couple of those. I mean, I could talk about 9/11. I was actually on a project site in right in DC, and we had no clue what was going on. We're just working. All of a sudden, air raid sirens start going off, and we're just kind of like, what the heck? And a friend called me like, we're under attack. I'm like, what? And we leave, and our office like, yes, go home. There's been these planes attacks. I lived an hour away, and after driving for 4 hours, I was only halfway home.
Wow.
Just for my office to say, come back to the office.
It's grand. Everything.
Turned around and drove another 3 hours back to the office and finally found out what happened.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, wow, oh my God. And they're like, yeah, just go to the job site tomorrow. And my office was literally right next to the Pentagon. So that was a little bit of a weird day. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm surprised anyone worked the next day in.
Well, it was because again, we had a contract to get the job done, and we had 3 days to finish it. And it was, let's just knock it out. We only had a little bit left. So like, let's just knock it out so we can not have to think about it. We can focus on what's going on in the world. So me and one other guy went there for like 10 minutes the next morning just to knock it out.
Okay.
Which we would have finished that day. But other than that, I guess the kind of weirdest thing would be, in a good way, I actually ran into my old drill sergeant on a job site.
That would be. let's hope that your drill sergeant was like a great underviewer at this stage, or no?
Well, no. I mean, he was my instructor for my job training, so he wasn't when I was in basic training, but he was my instructor. So he was older than me in higher rank. He was actually still in the military, and it had been, I think this was back in 2013. We ran into each other. So it was almost 20 years later, and he was still in the military.
Okay.
And it was like, dude, retire. It's like, just stop already. But no, I was doing a site survey at a military base, and he just happened to be there. And it was like, oh my God. But we were actually friends. We actually got along really good.
Well, that's a plus.
Yeah, it could have been worse. I mean, he was a great guy, but he had a lazy eye. So when he would yell at us, we never knew who he was talking to. And it was kind of creepy. But again, he was a great guy. Yeah. He actually used to play poker.
I'm sure there's plenty of stories you can tell about the times in the military versus like.
Nope.
What happened in the military stays in the military.
Can't talk about them.
Yeah.
Can't talk about that. That's government contracts and confidentiality. And plus, I don't want to get in trouble with any of my friends.
Yeah. So, did you enjoy more residential AV or commercial AV?
I definitely enjoyed the commercial AV a little bit better. Now, granted, when I did the residential, it was for just a handful of clients. Well, we had one client that was an ambassador. So we did all his homes around the world. And that was great. I got to see the Middle East, travel through Europe, and go to all these different places. But I ended up doing, okay, well, I need you to fix my satellite dish or crawl around in my attic. And yeah, that's not really my thing because I don't like spiders. But no, I definitely enjoyed the commercial aspect.
And you say you didn't like spiders?
No, no. Yeah. Like my first tattoo was of a spider because when I was young, I had a fear of needles and spiders. And yeah, I'm not afraid of needles anymore.
Wow.
So,
okay. Yeah. So now there's so much, Marcus, that goes on at the moment about AV is IT. Do you believe it?
That whole AV IT convergence and all that. That's crap, to be honest. We were putting IP addresses
right in
years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the convergence. If that was happening, that happened long ago. Because even like I mentioned, when I was working on a video conferencing unit back in '96, we used IP addresses. So there was already the blending of AV and IT back then. We needed network switches. We needed to pass through something to get to somewhere else. So we've been integrated for years. And even when I started doing commercial AV, most of the technology managers, the people responsible for the equipment after the fact, were the IT departments. Mm-hmm. So there's always been a mixture of the two. We're basically two sides of the same thing.
Yeah.
But nowadays, yeah, it is becoming a lot bigger because of AV over IP and all these other terms they're going to throw out there, which is just saying it's the same stuff with a new label.
But it isn't the same stuff.
Well, they've upgraded some of the technology, but where I'm still sending audio and video in my control from here to there.
Yeah.
Now I'm just solely relying on the network cable.
Yeah. And but it's like what I said to Tom, and this comes up in every one of our Under the Spotlights, and some people say yes, some people say no. But when you look at the likes of Tom and just talk about audio engineering and AES, then you just go, no, like audio is audio, and you're not going to teach an IT guy audio.
Well, and that's definitely, any sound engineer will most likely say that. And Tom being a engineer in general for audiovisual design and all that, he's also going to say that. Just like with audio, analog will never go away because my voice is analog.
Yes.
I'm analog.
Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah. But I think the biggest thing is going to be, it's not going to be a convergence of AV and IT and all that, or teaching IT how to do AV. IT is going to overtake AV, and everybody at AV is going to become IT.
Yes. And
we're just going to be the audio-visual technician for the IT group.
Yeah.
And we're just going to get absorbed eventually.
Unfortunately. I'm going to use unfortunately as well.
Well, again, I have my degree, so head start.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of, before we go into those questions of like what tips to give people coming into the industry, let's talk about how you got into Vixel. What year was that when someone approached you and said, do you want to be a trainer?
Well, actually, I wasn't really approached. It was back in early 2015, right around January, February. And the company I was with, I thought it was going to be a little bit more than what it was. It was just kind of stagnant, and just, there was no real movement. I didn't really see progression. And I was like, okay, well, let me see what kind of jobs are out there. So I went on Infocom's website and was looking at jobs and saw they were hiring for a staff instructor. I'm like, well, I have my CTS. We'll give it a shot. And I applied. I did the interview, and they called me back for a second interview where I had to make a presentation about anything I wanted and then present it in front of the vice president and the director of education at the time. And I ended up getting the job. Nice. And that was it. No prior teaching experience, nothing. And I just faked it. During my interview, I was like, oh, well, this is this. You let me pick the topic, so I'm going to talk about this. And they're like, yeah, you did great. I'm like, well, dance a monkey.
Yeah. Well, but some people will say if you have passion about a subject, the teaching comes hand in hand with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would definitely help. For me, it was having the knowledge about it to where not only it wasn't just the passion, but also having that background knowledge to where if somebody asked me a random question, I could legitimately answer it. Mm-hmm. And if not, I had a way of being respectful and responsive to that question of saying, you know what, I really don't know. Let's find out together. Mm-hmm. And that way we all know, and we can add that in there. But I think it was more confidence. I wasn't afraid to fall on my face. I wasn't afraid to mess up. I would even start classes and saying, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My glasses are fake. I can't read. I'm dyslexic, and I don't like you. Because you're going to be smarter than me by the time the course is over. Because all of the experience of the group was going to be greater than mine. It's like I would talk about my experience, mm-hmm. and then have them talk, and we could sit there and add up the years. The room had years of more experience than I did. So they're already smarter than me. I'm just making sure they were ready for how things could be written. Mm. So it was just more of a confidence. I was there to give them confidence more than anything.
I think everyone's got to just zone in on that comment that you just made, that you're dyslexic and those glasses are fake. So let's just touch on the dyslexic end of things. How do you find that?
Oh, I'm not really dyslexic.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, no. I would just say if I messed up in class and said the wrong thing, oh, yeah, I read it wrong. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, no. And it's nothing against anybody that has dyslexia or anything like that. I just said it so I wouldn't get myself in trouble for making a mistake.
Okay.
And it was my way of saying, I'm going to make mistakes. Yeah. I'm going to say the wrong word. I'm going to do the math wrong.
Like, Marcus, it's the fact is, I think from doing this series of Under the Spotlight, we've learned one thing, that in audiovisual, you can't fake it. No. Either you know it or you don't. And
exactly.
Anyone that says that they know it all is lying to themselves and the whole industry, thinking that they know it all. It's such a vast umbrella.
Yeah, well, and that's the one thing we also have in common with the IT industry is you can't know it all because technology evolves so much and so fast. There's always something new coming out, and there's no way you know about it entirely as soon as it happens.
Yes.
You're going to have to learn.
Yeah.
Just like with the Bix's last standard, they did Discus. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, my mind's exploding! This is all brand new stuff." I'm like, "No, it's actually what we've been doing for years.
It's
We
just a new
didn't
name.
know we were doing it."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It was like, "Oh, yeah, okay."
Yeah.
I mean, and was it? Tom likes to say, "LAR looks about right." Well, we're using our eyes to say, "Hey, it looks really good." Well, let's use some equipment to validate that it does. And that's the one thing that everybody in the industry should know is it's not just how you do something, it's how you validate and verify it. Because just saying that it's good or that it works isn't always enough. But having that validation, that commissioning process and saying, look, I can prove that it works. That's really what we got to get to.
Yeah. So out of all the courses that you've done as a trainer with the VIXA, what's been your favorite? Like you mentioned off mic earlier, like it was like Tom was the audio guy. Well, sorry, Chuck was the audio guy. Tom was the engineer type of guy. You sort of fit into the realm of IT just because of your IT background.
Yep.
So, yeah, were you given most of the IT courses, or did you enjoy doing all the IT end of things, or where did you fit in?
Yes, to everything. Yeah, no, I did all of the networking courses, which there were only two. Network technologies and networked AV systems, otherwise known as NAVs. So I did both of those courses over in Europe, throughout the US and the US shows. And I really enjoyed those. But the whole time I was there, I kept saying that I kind of felt like they were missing something, just a little bit. And it was, we needed more hands-on. And we're kind of developing how we could get to that. Just when this whole COVID thing happened, we were actually in the middle of creating a whole new course that was going to be hands-on, actually teaching people how to configure the network, how to design it and develop it and integrate it. So I really love those courses. And yeah, no, I mean, but I really never had a bad course. I did pretty much every course that Avixa had to offer in person, except other than Design 2 and Design 3, I've taught.
Right. Okay.
Design prep, install 1, install 2, install prep, CTS, did them all. Enjoyed every last one of them because no matter what the topic was, we always made the class fun to where people enjoyed it. We would joke around, we would learn something, and we would make activities to do to make sure everyone got it. So, I mean, one of the last classes I did over in Europe was actually in Belfast. Now, granted, that's Northern Ireland and whatever, but no, but it was actually a great class just because, one, I had a few people in there that had taken one of my networking courses.
Yeah.
So they already knew me. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, hey, yeah, pay attention. He knows what he's talking about. I'm like, no, it's all scripted.
But so, unfortunately, with everything that's happened, COVID-19, you are now on the lookout for a new job search.
I'm a free agent. Yes.
Now, where do you want to end up, Marcus? Like, is training your thing now, or would you go back into some of the realms of what you taught before?
Yeah, well, if I went back into commercial integration, whatever aspect that is, whether it was consulting, designing, or even as a technician, or even as a project manager, I would still want to have that flexibility to be able to teach, whether it was internally with that company or even volunteering for something with Avixa or Cedia or whomever, even if it was a manufacturer, because I did like the dynamic of being in that classroom, because one, I got to meet new people and I got to learn a little bit about what they know. So I definitely don't want to step away from that. And now if a teaching position does come up in the AV world, I will gladly take that. But I think it's just as important to stay in the field, because it's hard. It was hard as an instructor with the Avixa to stay up to date with everything that was changing, because the only time we got to know about it was in an email or at one of the trade shows, be it ISE or the US Infocom, where we got to see the show floor for 5 minutes. And it's like, yay, I got to see one thing. So we were a little bit behind the times. So.
Are you looking forward to that now? Let's say you go down a different path again, that you will be able to see when we start doing trade shows again, if we ever do trade shows again. But if
we just had one.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Infocom China just happened.
Yeah.
So that was in person.
Yeah, that was in person. So hopefully now, fingers crossed, that ISE actually happens now in June.
In the beginning of the first week in June in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Is what. Funny thing is, I was actually just on a call the other day with Mike Blackman, who's the managing partner of ISE. And we were actually talking about something completely different. He was going to renew his CTS. And we started talking about the whole change. And because myself and Chuck had been going over to ISE and doing a little, what we called flash tracks, where we had a booth and we'd do like 20 minutes of training, and we'd have vendors come in and other subject matter experts do like little training. So we were used to going over to Amsterdam and doing that.
Yes.
And we were excited. It's like 2021, we're going to go to Barcelona. Yeah. And we were going to start doing that. And that was great. We both speak a little bit of Spanish, not very good. And then it was like, okay, well, I no longer have a position. It's like, great. Now I don't have to work when I go to ISE. Yeah. And then they changed the date. And I'm like, no. So now it's going to be June, but I think it's going to be great. And I do hope that it is in person. I think the industry needs to be in front of people.
I think everyone's at the stage, Marcus, where it's like, how many more virtual conferences can we go to without having this in-person feeling? And even if the first one is strange, if we're still all wearing face coverings and we're not networking to the extent that we would usually network,
even if I was in a full hazmat suit, that wouldn't matter. Like, to me, the one pivotal thing I was really looking forward to of having ISE in Barcelona in February was the last in-person show the industry had.
Yes.
Was the 2020 ISE, the farewell to Amsterdam. And that was right when the virus was kind of spreading around, because we had hand sanitizer. Everybody was like, there was no handshake. It was all the elbow bump and, it's like, keep your distance a little bit. And then everything shut down. I mean, granted, it happened in Europe first. Things started shutting down there, I think, right at the end of February or in the middle of February. And then it finally came over here to the States, where they shut us down in March. And to have that is like, okay, that's, if we can get back to live in-person training by February, it means it wasn't a year long. It was just short. And having the China show, I'm seeing the post on social media about that was great. I mean, now that was a postponed show, and it's good that we're fine. The industry's kind of starting to get back on track, because granted, I know everybody's a little nervous with COVID and all that, but, and this is just my opinion, I'm not basing it on anything else. No one was ever afraid of the flu like this before, not for over 100 years. Even when SARS and bird flu and all the other ones, we still did our shows. They just took precautions to make sure we try to keep people as safe as possible. And that's what I think we really need to do is just be safe. But we need to have that face-to-face again.
And we've had Mike on one of our previous episodes, and I have to say the amount of thoughts that's going in behind the scenes that people don't realize. Like, we used to joke at previous ISE conferences of going, what, I queued up for 20 minutes to just get my coat and bag out of the lockers. Come on, guys, what's going on? To the amount of logistics that goes on behind the scenes, and then add this layer of COVID-19 on top of it to make sure everyone's safe. I mean, all I'm going to say to our listeners is listen back to that episode with Mike Blackman, because the amount of strategy that goes into planning it. And then everyone says, oh, well, why can't I just arrange it for a month later or a week later or whatever? No, it's the fact that it's all the hotels, it's the whole city.
Oh,
there's yeah,
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned the hotels and all that, but it's not even just that. I mean, even consider the vendors.
Yes,
they planned on shipping everything that are live units that they could be selling or demoing somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So there's the shipment of everything, the logistics of, like you said, hotels, and just getting the permits in the city because they had to put everything up. But then there's actually the location. There could be another event going on. Mm-hmm. And even on top of all that, what if there is another event going on? Where are you going to put it? And what if you already bought your ticket? Could you get it refunded or transferred? Because I know usually when the show begins, there's kind of a sigh of relief from all the people that are putting it on and all the people that are responsible. So like ISE, that whole ISE group, the first day or so, they're running around frantic because they have to make sure every little thing is perfect. By that last day, they finally breathe because they get the weekend off, and that following Monday, they're starting planning for the next year. Mm. And it really takes a year just to plan out.
At least, yeah.
So with everything with COVID, that threw a wrench in everything, but it just showed how good those people are at their jobs to keep managing everything else and then add everything else on top of making sure there were security protocols, making sure there was hand sanitizers, there were restrictions in place.
So you're looking forward to that feeling once we get back on the trade show ground, to be able to actually go and see trade stalls without knowing that I have to teach or I have to.
Yeah, because like I said before, when we were teaching with VIX or Infocom, whatever you want to call ICIA, whatever you want to call them, like when we did the US show, we would do 3 days of training before the show even opened. And then we would do a day of seminars, and then the show floor would actually open where everybody else comes. And we were still doing training throughout that. So the staff instructors, which was Tom Kerr, Chuck Espinosa, myself, and Chrissy Spurlock, we would get maybe 5 minutes out of the whole week of the show to see the actual floor. And that was it. Mm-hmm. So getting that chance to actually go around and see the new technology, actually enjoy it, maybe even take a class, but actually be able to interact with people outside of the 40 by 60 foot room that I'm supposed to be teaching in that's always freezing would be nice. So, because to be honest, I've been in the industry, like I said, almost 20 years. I'd never gotten a chance to go to any of the shows until I worked for Avixa. Because there was always a project. There was always something else going on.
Yes. This must be the longest time that you've been out of work from the AV industry in the 20 years.
Well, it's been the longest time I've been without a job since I was 15.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because they let us go on August 4th. And so in about 4 days or 3 days, it'll be 2 months.
Yes. Yeah.
And the longest I've gone before was about a month when I just took vacation when I got out of the military.
Wow. Now,
it's.
You say that you have some prospects on the line. We're not going to ask you what they are, but things are looking a bit more positive on that front.
Yeah. Well, like you said, Tom Kerr was good enough. He got a position that was announced recently with Alamo. So that's I feel great for him. Mostly because he still has a child who lives at home and all that. And he literally just bought a house like 2 years ago. And Chrissy Spurlock was able to get a position just recently, or at least I was told that she had an offer. I don't know where it is or anything, but she made a comment that she had an offer, but she was feeling it out. So yeah, I'm out of the instructors. I'm the last one of the former instructors, as Chuck still works at Avixa, that is still waiting on a position. But yeah, there's one position that it looks promising. I'm just waiting to hear back on some final details. So I haven't gotten an offer letter yet. But I'm also not going to stop my search because just because there's a potential, I don't want to put, as the old adage goes, all my eggs in one basket.
I asked Tom before he ended up with Almo. Do you see yourself ever going back freelance yourself? Or do you think it's too risky of a business now at this stage with COVID-19?
Well, no. I mean, I've talked to a few of the guys I've known from just being around as an instructor and stuff and meeting so many people. And there was a few places that said they didn't just curious, like, oh, do you happen to have a position open at your company? And they're like, no, we're not really hiring, but we might have some freelance work. Not a problem with that. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. Because to be honest, it might take a little bit of freelance work to get me back into the groove of, doing drawings again. Because site surveys are easy. That's not a problem. But getting back into kind of getting some of the rust off for the past 5 years of not doing drawings and not doing that, but teaching it. So, I would have no problem doing some freelance work, whether it was consulting, designing, or whatever. So yeah, no, I'm not going to say no to anything, but I'm not going to say yes to everything. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. Well, the price has to be right, as always. Is the
key. Yeah. The price has to be right, and I've already put out there, I'm willing to relocate. I would love to go back to Europe. I was stationed in Europe for a couple of years, but the only problem with that is I got to get sponsored, whatever. But if it's anywhere in the U.S., I'd go there. I don't have limitations. I have 2 kids, but they don't live at home. And my daughter tells me she wants me to go to Europe because she wants to go see things. I think she just wants to use me, as most daughters do, to go to Europe.
Yeah, you should really break it to your daughter that you can't travel at the moment.
Well, she's 13. She doesn't know. She wants to go see the Tower of London and stuff. I'm like, let's go to someplace happy.
Yeah. Or Disneyland at least. Yeah.
Well, we've done Disneyland, but and I don't know if I want to do Disneyland Paris or Euro Disney or whatever they call it, but I told her if we went to Europe, I'll wait till she's a little older and I'll take her to some nicer places. Because I've at least had enough traveling done over there that I know a few places that are pretty cool.
Yeah. So we sound very negative of the AV industry. The AV industry will survive and it will pick up once things go. I'm going to ask, for those who are thinking of going down the route of joining AV, what tips have you got for the up and coming young AV technician or AV person?
Yeah, well, anybody in general that's looking to cross over into the AV industry or join it for the first time, maybe they're right out of school, don't be scared. Almost everything in the AV industry is something we already do in our daily lives. If it's a site survey, it's no different than going house hunting. You want to make sure it fits the needs that you have. If you're doing integration, most people try to set up their own entertainment system at home anyway. Now you're just going to learn how to do it the right way. But no, definitely get the training in. There's plenty of online training. There's plenty of online resources for every aspect of the AV industry to get you kind of introduced, whether it's learning the essentials, learning just the names. The hardest thing I found when I first started was getting all the acronyms,
Oh my
all
God.
those abbreviations. Oh my God, there were so many. I thought I was never going to learn.
And Marcus, now you talk about living in America and Europe. Do you identify the fact that there is a VIXA Americanisms to CT?
100%.
Oh, thank you. Someone admits to it.
Oh no, I admitted it to it when I first started there.
Yeah.
That it, and the thing is, like, especially when you talk about like the terminologies that are very U.S.
Mhm.
As opposed to international. Those came because when they were, and this is the story I got, and I've come to realize that it actually is true. When the tests were originally written, it was U.S. based.
Mhm.
When they went to go international, the terms that are used in the UK are slightly different than what they might use in Italy, which are slightly different than what they might use in Africa. So which one's right? Well, they couldn't decide, so let's just stick with what we got.
Yeah. Well,
And
I actually brought this up with Tom after doing the CTSI exam. There was one of my questions, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? I have no idea what this is called." And it was, "What is the shield, like the metal plate? What's the name of the metal plate that goes over a BNC connector?" I'm like,
the ferrule.
"Yeah, I have never heard that word before." And
Yeah.
now maybe I'm just, yeah, maybe I've never
Well,
been subjected to it, but I would have just called it the metal plate that goes over the BNC connector.
well, yeah, and that one comes down to that one they would have looked at as a glossary term.
Yeah.
So where that would have been it should have been in the exam guide book that said, hey, this is a glossary term, but there should be a list. And I want to say they were actually trying to develop something, especially for the training,
Mm-hmm.
where you could select your region and get the terms that are more prevalent in your region, which is great. If they would do that for the exam too.
Yeah.
When you logged in, you selected the region and it loaded questions designed for your region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. And I actually had a case of that when I taught in, I think it was in the Netherlands, in Brooklyn, that I actually had a student took the exam and failed. And I stayed in contact with him, and he told me he was having problems with the vocabulary. He was used to certain terms, but he was also reading the test, translating it into Dutch, and then retranslating it back to English. So we went over some of the words, and like he got the term stakeholder confused with stockholder,
Oh wow.
because when he did the translation, it translated in Dutch to stockholder, not stakeholder.
Shit. Yeah.
So
Okay.
he was getting even just the translation, especially when you're not speaking English,
Mm-hmm.
having that and making sure that we're actually getting the right information out. And I was actually one of the last things I was working on at Avixa before the axe came down was getting a central repository of all the terms regionally around the world, so we can base our training and education on those terms for those regions.
Right.
Which God knows what happened to that, because I don't work there anymore.
Yeah, and whether it's ever going to be touched upon again is another question.
It had been done before,
Yeah.
20 years ago,
Wow. Okay.
but that was 20 years ago, and I was asking people, well, where is that list? I don't know.
Yeah.
No one knew where that was.
Right. Okay. So get for the going back to the answer to the question,
Yeah.
getting people certified, go off and try and get your VIXA qualification.
Yeah. I mean, I would say even like I wouldn't strive for like the CTS, not
Okay.
right out the gate. That's going to be something that once you've been in the industry for a few months, almost a year.
Mhm.
But there's a certification they have, the AVT, Audiovisual Technologist. Everything's online. It's just making sure you know the essentials. Do you know what a cable is compared to a wire? Two different things. And just those basic little things you need to know about the industry. Start there. After that, pick which area of the industry you really want to focus on. Do you want to be an integrator pulling cable? Do you want to do programming, project management, or maybe move your way up to design? There is a kind of pathway you have to follow. They're not just going to make you a designer because you want to be one. You need to know audio visual design.
Yeah.
So just talk to people. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
My wife has a degree in maths, and she was trying to teach me the maths to AV, and I said, sorry, this does not commute with me until I sat down or compute with me rather, until I sat down with Tom's cartoon videos. I went, right, so this is a monitor, this is the size of the monitor. It's like pause, like take notes, draw it out myself, like maths is not my strong thing.
Yeah, and math, I've always been pretty good at math, but it was looking at some of the formulas they have, especially for the design. It's like, oh my God, there's so much. This is basically calculus. And I'm not afraid to say, I use the calculator.
Yeah.
But it takes, especially when I taught, I would teach people a few different ways of doing the math. Only because everyone's going to have their own way of, it's going to be easier for them to remember. Some people remember pi in the ear for Ohm's law, P over IE, power over amps and volts, and all that. Whatever your method is, find it. Don't just take whatever a piece of paper says and say, that's it. I would even challenge people, if you can find a better way to get the same answer, show us. And put a challenge out there. And a few people actually did it. It's like, well, you can just do it this way.
I'm going to throw some quick fire questions at you now.
Sure.
Infocom or ISE?
ISE.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay. Why ISE?
One, we get a lot more people that attend ISE, but I found while Infocom was great, we had our 3-day training courses there before the show started. Since we didn't have that at ISE, we actually got to engage with the members of the industry a lot more. And we still had some training there, but it wasn't just, oh, we're just going to separate training completely and then have the show over here. Everything was together. So it felt more involved. But I mean, even just going between the two different shows, a lot of the people I saw at the Infocom show in the States, I also saw at ISE.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So, but I didn't always get to see the people that I saw trained in Europe coming to the States.
Do you think that's going to change a lot now with COVID-19? That, we're talking about Infocom and ISE going to be in the same month now.
Well, yeah, they're going to be in the same month, but the thing is, Avixa only owns half of ISE. CEDIA owns the other half. So you're going to see I think you're going to see a smaller presence from Avixa.
Yes.
But you might see an increased presence from CEDIA there to kind of compensate. Yeah. So I think it's just going to be the international team from Avixa there, those that probably just around Europe, and the ISE team there kind of doing the hosting for the Avixa side. While since the Avixa is headquartered in the United States, the remainder of that group is probably going to do the U.S. show.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, and I mean, well, to be honest, Avixa doesn't do any planning with ISE. There's very little. ISE does all the planning, but the Avixa themselves, they only do a little bit. Yeah. So ISE is a lot easier for Avixa to handle.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So Florida or Las Vegas?
Is there a third choice? Oh wow, I would say Las Vegas.
Yeah, you strike me as the Vegas guy. Do you?
Well,
You spoke about poker with your military way
Uh,
back then. So, yeah.
well, yeah, but I don't really gamble. Like when we play poker, it was just for fun. There was no
Okay.
money in exchanging hands. But no, I think there's a lot more to do in Vegas because you have the shows, you get the entertainment value there, like the Grand Canyon, things like that. With Orlando, you're stuck in the middle of Florida. It's really hot. It's really humid. And a lot of people I know, they go to Disney World or some of the other amusement areas, and you can go to the beach, which is like an hour away, and that's fine. But it's like, it's Florida. I mean, everybody's been to the beach. Well, I shouldn't say most people have been to a beach. But with Las Vegas, there's a lot of people that haven't been to the desert. They haven't seen something like the Grand Canyon or just the lights in Vegas. Or I think just you get a better show there.
Yeah. If you had now Father's Day or Christmas that is coming up before we even know if Christmas will be here, but if you were given one tech toy, any limit of budget, what would it be and why?
Ooh, wait. Hold on. Did you say any tech toy?
Any tech toy,
Any
any
tech toy?
budget.
Oh wow, that would be kind of a tough one. Um, I would want I'd want a desktop VTC unit.
Oh wow, okay.
Built like the monitor with the built-in camera, all that. That's dedicated just for video conferencing. I actually had one when I worked for a company. I was a sales engineer, and I actually had one that was part of the gig tour because I had so many video conferences I was doing. So I think that would be the one right now because I have a lot of tech toys. I got a couple VR head units. I got a couple switchers and stuff that I play with. I got a AMX control system in my closet back here that I play around with fun and a couple touch panels. I've collected toys throughout the years that I don't need too much anymore. But that would be the one thing because right now I've got the Logitech webcam on top of a monitor. I got my laptop over here.
Yeah, the
And
microphone that wasn't working for you.
yeah, this thing, yeah, it's great because as you can see, I'm moving it away. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not working. It's not recognizing it today. Because last time we were going to do this podcast, it was like my whole computer shut down. Now it's like, so I'm gonna have to reload some software and figure out what's going on. It's just my luck.
Like as soon as I did the podcast last time with Tom, he was like, "What microphone is this?" And I was like, "I actually can't remember. I know it's a Rode microphone, but like I've had this microphone for the past like 10 years." Nearly.
Well, did you see Tom's microphone?
Yes.
The label it had on it, WTRD.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. That's.
Tom is one of the funniest, quiet guys you'll ever meet.
Yeah. But like he actually admits that he's an introvert. So like, yeah.
Oh, he 100% admits it.
Yeah, I think that's all our you've told us. So any final tips for anyone that's going into AV?
Yeah, don't give up because even like you said, the AV industry is bouncing back. I know here in the States and a few of my contacts, even over in Europe, businesses are picking back up. People are starting to go back to offices. Integrations are happening again. Now is the time to get your training in before it kind of hits back 100%. But if you're going to do it, just do it. I haven't met too many people that regretted going into the AV industry.
Yeah.
There's so many different facets. Just stick with it.
And we are a strong family that support one another through the tough times. Yeah. Like I know, I'm guessing you're learning that at the moment, Marcus.
Well, I've known that for a while. Scott Wills, he was the Avixa's director of international membership and all that, was my original trainer back in 2000 to get my CTS.
Yes.
And like when I first started Avixa, like 15 years later, I was like, oh my God, you were my instructor. He's like, cool.
He didn't remember.
But because it was 15 years ago and again, the class was like 3 days, and I didn't keep up with anybody. I just remembered his voice.
Yes. Yeah.
It was like, I know that voice. But after a while, you kind of, I've run into a couple who was like, oh, I was in your class. And I was like, okay, you look really familiar.
Yeah.
And I can't picture the name, but I know that face. Mm-hmm. You did something weird.
This is the All Things TechIE podcast.